So now what we're going to do is you're going to be given a graph, and we're going to figure out what the equation is from that graph. Before we start, we're going to have, actually, I'm going to give some formulas. So we know that the general form of the sine equation is going to be f of x is a sine k x minus c plus d. So that's just the transformations. So that's the vertical stretch, left, right, and the up, down. We haven't discussed the k yet. That's going to be coming up, but we're not going to be using it yet. So mostly what we want to do is we want to figure out what is the a, what is the c, and what is the d. And when we know those three values, then we're done. So a is the amplitude. So there's two ways of doing the amplitude. You could either say it's the distance from the middle to the top, or there's actually a formula where a is going to be the maximum y value, and then you're going to subtract the minimum y value and divide by 2. And that's a formula for a. For d, it's going to be the average of the maximum and minimum. And the way you find the average is you add them up and you divide by 2. So they're kind of similar formulas, unfortunately, but a little bit different. And then for c, we're going to figure out how we figure out c in a little bit. Okay. So we need to figure out the values here. So here's a graph, and we're trying to figure out the equation. So we know that the middle is at 7. So we could say, for example, that d right away is 7. And the amplitude, which is how far we go from the middle to the top, and the amplitude is 3, and we're done. If we didn't know that, we could calculate it. We could say, okay, a is the max minus the min, divided by 2, which is 6 divided by 2, which is 3. And our d value is going to be 10 plus 4 divided by 2, which is 14 over 2, which is 7, which is what we kind of already knew, but if you don't know it, luckily you have a formula. There's no phase shift in this thing. It's a sine graph. It starts at 0. And so what we're going to have is our answer is going to be that f of x is, someone's playing some loud music, 3 sine x plus 7. And that's our equation of the first one. Okay, example 2. What we're going to be doing with example 2, same idea. So the middle is 2, so d looks like it's 2. The amplitude, which is the distance from the middle to the top, is going to be 6. And if we didn't know it, we could say that a is 8 minus 4 on 2, which is 12 over 2, which is 6. And the d is going to be 8 plus negative 4 over 2, which is 4 over 2, which is 2. Either way, the answer is going to be that f of x equals 6 sine x plus 2. Okay. So this is a cosine graph. It starts at the top, so we have a cosine graph here. But same things, nothing really changes. Just because it's a cosine graph doesn't change much, except it's going to be cosine, of course. So if you look at it, the middle is going to be 1, and the amplitude is going to be 4. Or you could go 5 minus negative 3, which is that. And we could also say that 5 plus negative 3 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. So either way, our answer is going to be, I'm doing those in blue, that f of x equals a cos of x plus 1. They may be thinking that we could actually write this as a sine graph instead. I mean, how did we know that this was a cosine graph? And the answer is we didn't. So I'll get to that in a little bit. That's a teaser of where we're going with this. Example 4. So what we have here is another one. Now this one though, notice we start at the middle and we start going down. So that's going to do something, of course. So our middle value is at 5. Our amplitude, we seem to be going 2 away. And if we're not sure, we could have done, again, we could have done the equations. Take the average of those two numbers. 10 over 2 is 5. However, since we're in the middle going down, this is not a normal sine graph. Remember, a normal sine graph would go kind of up. This is a negative sine graph. So this one's going to be negative sine x. Oops, I made a mistake on that. F of x is negative 2. Don't forget the amplitude. Sine x plus 5. And again, kind of like the cosine graph, how do we know it's a negative? How do we know that it's not just a cosine graph or a sine graph? And we'll figure that out in the next example.